In every age of the Imperium, wars are fought with blades, with bolters, with the fury of gods unleashed upon worlds. But there are other wars, silent ones, invisible to history, written not in blood but in deceit. They are the wars that never make it into the chronicles of the Astra Militarum or the hymns of the Ecclesiarchy, because their battlefields are truth and memory themselves. And among those secret wars, none has endured longer, or cut deeper, than the one between the Inquisition and the Alpha Legion. To most, the Alpha Legion is an enigma, traitors without cause, loyalists without allegiance. They move like ghosts through the warp and the data stream alike, erasing their tracks, rewriting their enemies into their own image. To the Inquisition, they are not just a threat, they are the mirror held to its own face. Because both serve the Imperium's survival in ways that defy morality, and both have long since forgotten what loyalty truly means. This is the story of that shadow war. Of double agents who became legends. Of inquisitors who questioned not just their enemies but the Emperor himself. Of a truth so dangerous that to speak it aloud is to vanish without a trace. And before we begin, if you value stories that live between faith and heresy, if you believe knowledge itself can be a weapon, then join us. Like, share, and subscribe. Every voice that remembers keeps the shadow war alive. The first truth of the Alpha Legion is that there are no truths. Every record, every chronicle, every myth about them contradicts the next. Some say they were the last of the legions born and the first to fall. Others claim they never fell at all. I have seen data slates that describe their primarch Alfarius as a savior who bled for humanity's future, and others that depict him as the architect of its damnation. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps neither ever existed in the way we imagine. For the Hydra, truth is not a weapon, it is bait. Long before the Horus heresy carved the galaxy into faith and flame, the Alpha Legion operated like a mind within a mind, an organism whose purpose was self-preservation through misdirection. Their homeworlds, if they ever had any, were not places of pilgrimage but breeding grounds for ideas. The Legion's earliest records describe their training not in martial prowess but in deception. Recruits taught to lie to themselves until the lie became indistinguishable from conviction. They called it the Second Oath, a vow to serve a cause greater than any one master. To this day, none agree what that cause truly was. When I first studied their archives within the inquisitorial vaults beneath Terra, I found something strange. An entire data chamber of reports sealed by inquisitors who had all vanished within a single century. The seals bore different signatures, different ordo markings, but all carried the same phrase, written in an identical hand. They are us. I remember tracing the words on the metal with a gloved hand and wondering if that was fear speaking. Or admiration. In the years following the heresy, the Alpha Legion's remnants scattered across the stars. Where other traitor legions fled to demon worlds and cultist empires, the Hydra vanished into the fabric of the Imperium itself. Some masqueraded as loyalists, joining rogue Astra Militarum regiments and rebuilding fractured chapters under false banners. Others dissolved into the Administratum, the Navis Nobilitae, even the Ecclesiarchy. They became a virus of belief, hiding within the very immune system meant to destroy them. The Inquisition learned of this infection too late. Early purges burned entire sectors, but every kill brought 2 more names, 2 more shadows. Agents infiltrated Manufactura, data vaults, and even the Schola Progenium, chasing whispers of alpha cells. Yet the deeper they hunted, the more the lines blurred. One inquisitor discovered that his entire retinue had been compromised for decades, not by possession, but by conviction. They believed they were loyal to the Emperor, and so did he. The revelation broke him. He burned his own ship rather than face the question that every inquisitor secretly fears. What if the Hydra serves a truer emperor than the one who sits the throne? There are reports of Alfarius' death, many of them. Gilliman's own log claims the deed was done upon Escrador, yet other accounts insist Alfarius survived, or that it was not Alfarius at all but his twin, Omegon. Perhaps both perished, or neither. Perhaps that was always the point. The Alpha Legion understood something the others did not. Immortality does not require life, only legacy. A dead god can command armies if his myth endures. A dead Primarch can rule a legion if no one knows which face was his. It is said their symbol, the Hydra, is not merely a crest, but a philosophy. Cut off one head and two arise to replace it. But that is the simple reading. The truer meaning, whispered only in the secret annals of the Ordo Hereticus, is darker. The Hydra has no head at all. It acts, it reacts, it adapts, guided by an intelligence distributed through countless minds. No leader, no body, no weakness. When the Inquisition realized this, they stopped calling them a legion and began calling them a phenomenon. There are stories of entire planets rebelling without knowing why, of governors executed for sedition they never intended, of fleets turning their guns on allies in the name of justice. Each time, investigations uncovered fragments of the same data ghosts, encoded signals repeating the words Hydra Dominatus. The phrase translates imperfectly, not dominance, but influence. Not control, but contamination. It is the whisper that says obedience and rebellion are the same act when the cause is invisible. I have spoken with men who swear the Alpha Legion no longer exists. I have read reports that claim they were destroyed, absorbed, forgotten. But even as I write this, I wonder, who wrote those reports? Who decided the Hydra was dead? Because I have seen it, hidden in the code of astropathic transmissions, buried in prayer script written across the genome of the Imperium itself. Every secret order, every faction that claims to protect humanity, every inquisitor who believes they stand alone, all of them carry the same mark. It is the Hydra's gift and its curse. They are not coming back. They never left. Every attempt to understand the Alpha Legion begins as investigation and ends as infection. Their archives are not archives at all, but mazes, data that rewrites itself, histories that consume the reader. I learned this when the Inquisition assigned me to the Hydra dossier. 3 other acolytes had gone before me. None returned. Their minds, I was told, were not broken by torture or warp corruption, but by understanding too much. I thought myself immune to such fates. I was wrong. My first lead came from the Segmentum Obscurus, a world called Virelia 9, a minor manufactorum planet producing last packs and armor plating for the Astra Militarum. There had been disappearances among the overseers, minor acts of sabotage, whispers of heresy. It was routine work. Or so I believed. The deeper I looked, the less there was to find. Every report contradicted the last. Every witness described the same saboteur with different faces, different ranks, different names. When I finally captured one, he thanked me before swallowing a toxin that left his veins patterned in the shape of a coiled serpent. His last words still haunt me. We are the message, not the messengers. The Inquisition teaches that heresy is a disease, that once detected, it can be cut out with fire. But how do you burn something that exists only as an idea? On Virelia 9, I realized that the Alpha Legion had evolved beyond treachery. They no longer sought to destroy the Imperium. They sought to redefine it. Their agents did not fight in open rebellion. They guided production quotas, redirected supply chains, rewrote military orders by degrees so subtle no one noticed until the results aligned precisely with their unseen design. A planet defended too late, a governor promoted too soon. The Imperium's vast machinery turning against itself without ever realizing why. When the purge came, it was swift and absolute. The Ordo Hereticus declared the planet compromised and sanctioned exterminatus. I watched from orbit as the firestorm consumed the cities. Billions died. Yet as the surface melted to glass, I felt no triumph, only the whisper that this too was expected, that in destroying their creation, we had only completed it. Weeks later, as I reviewed the transmission logs, I found a single message that had slipped through before the planet's death. It was short, composed in the ancient cipher of the Alpha Legion, Hydra Dominatus. The head watches the hand. I had it translated by 3 separate savants, each giving a slightly different meaning. The command observes the action. The leader studies the servant. The self deceives the self. None were wrong. I began to see patterns everywhere, not of their making, but of mine. I saw the Hydra in the shifting hierarchies of the Ordos, in the endless rivalries between inquisitors, in the constant paranoia that drove us to devour one another's secrets. The Legion had no need to infiltrate the Inquisition. We were already the perfect reflection of their creed. They had taught us without ever speaking to us. The deeper I fell into their myth, the more I came to understand that the Alpha Legion's true genius was not in deception, but in revelation. They revealed the lie at the heart of the Imperium. That purity of purpose could survive in a galaxy built on manipulation. They forced us to confront the truth that every loyalist, every inquisitor, every priest serves a different vision of the same God. And in that chaos of faith, the Hydra thrives. One night, while studying the encrypted fragments recovered from a derelict Vox station near Cadia's ruins, I found something impossible. A direct transmission from Alfarius himself. Or perhaps from someone wearing his name. The voice was calm, confident, and utterly human. We never betrayed him, it said. We only saw further. The message was old, recorded millennia ago, yet it felt immediate, as though the speaker were whispering into my ear. I could have reported it. I could have purged the data core and prayed for forgiveness. Instead, I listened again, and again. Each time the words changed slightly, the cadence shifting as if adapting to my thoughts. By the 10th replay, I could no longer tell if I was hearing a recording or remembering a dream. That was the moment I understood the Hydra's secret. Belief itself is their weapon. They do not need to kill their enemies. They only need to make them doubt. The Legion does not conquer worlds. It conquers meaning. I began this investigation to destroy them. Now I write these words as one who cannot be certain if I already serve them. Because the Alpha Legion does not recruit. It reveals. And when you finally see the pattern, it is already too late. The Inquisition does not sleep. It cannot afford to. It dreams instead, through 1,000 eyes, through the ceaseless murmur of data feeds and interrogations and confessions recited beneath lumen lamps that never dim. In those dreams, it watches the galaxy twist and tear itself apart, and in watching, it convinces itself that vigilance is victory. That was what I believed once. Before I understood that the Hydra had already coiled around the dream itself. When I returned from Virelia 9, the Ordo Hereticus summoned me to the conclave on Terra. I remember the descent into the vaults beneath the palace, corridors carved into the planet's bedrock, lined with statues of inquisitors who had vanished into their own investigations. The air smelled of sanctified oil and ozone. Servitors drifted along the walls, their metal fingers scraping data sigils into plates of obsidian. At the heart of that labyrinth stood the council chamber, a sphere of black marble where words were sharper than blades. 3 inquisitors presided, Lord Inquisitor Caldus Ven, whose mind was said to hold more secrets than any living being, Inquisitrix Lyra Sotha of the Ordo Xenos, her eyes replaced with augmetic lenses that never blinked, and the Silent One whom none named aloud. They questioned me for hours, not about the Hydra but about myself, my dreams, my fears, my doubts. The Ordo does not punish ignorance. It punishes contamination. They searched for it in every syllable I spoke. When they dismissed me, I was neither condemned nor absolved. I was simply released as if they were waiting to see what infection I would carry back into the world. That was how the Inquisition hunted the Alpha Legion, not through confrontation, but containment. They called it the Net, a web of operatives, informants, and servitor intelligences spread across 1,000 worlds, each programmed to observe, to report, to suspect. It was said that no heretic could escape it. But the truth is, no one could be certain where the net ended or who was weaving it. I have read the internal protocols. The structure folds in on itself, cells reporting to cells, inquisitors observing inquisitors. Entire operations vanish because one handler deems another suspect. Every purge is followed by another purge. The Hydra could not have built a better prison. There is an old saying in the Ordo, knowledge protects. It is a lie. Knowledge isolates. The deeper one peers into forbidden archives, the more the world dissolves into mirrors. I saw it happen to Caldus Ven himself. He had been tracking an Alpha Legion operative embedded within the Administratum on Ophelia 7th, a mid-tier functionary whose reports subtly altered the Ecclesiarchy's logistics. When Ven confronted the man, he discovered that every single document, every picked capture, every witness had been fabricated by a different inquisitor, each believing they were serving the same mission. Ven realized then that the operative did not exist. The infiltration was the investigation. The Alpha Legion had made us hunt our own reflection. After that revelation, Ven sealed himself within his fortress ship Prevalidus, claiming he needed solitude to purge the corruption. 6 months later, his vessel re-emerged from the warp, crewed entirely by new personnel. When the Ordo demanded an explanation, the ship's Vox broadcast a single sentence before cutting out, I have seen the pattern. No one ever boarded it again. It drifts still, its beacon silent, its machine spirits muttering in code that no lex mechanic can decipher. But the infection runs deeper than any one man. I began to notice discrepancies in the inquisitorial archives. Operations recorded under false sigils, requisitions signed by inquisitors long dead, orders that canceled themselves within the same transmission. Some of these I could trace to human error, others defied any origin. It was as if the Inquisition itself had begun editing its own memory. I realized with a kind of cold horror that the Hydra had found the one enemy even it could not outwit, the machine of paranoia that it had taught us to build. I remember standing before the data altars, watching the flickering lines of code run like scripture, and wondering whether the Inquisition's net still hunted the Alpha Legion, or whether the Legion had simply taken control of the net. The difference, I realized, was meaningless. The two had become indistinguishable. Both thrived on secrecy. Both believed themselves the only defense against chaos. Both would burn 1,000 worlds to preserve their version of truth. The Inquisition had become its own shadow war, its agents devouring one another in the name of purity. The Hydra did not need to win. It only needed to wait. And somewhere in that labyrinth of silence I began to hear my name whispered in the same tone the Inquisition reserved for the heretic. The whisper began as static, a faint distortion in the vox line that carried my daily transmissions back to Terra. Then the distortion became a voice. It spoke in the pattern of inquisitorial encryption, yet layered beneath was something older, the rhythm of a Hydra cipher I had only ever read about. The words were simple, almost tender. You've seen enough. Now you will see the rest. I destroyed the terminal immediately. Protocol demanded it. But the message had already taken root in my mind. For days I could hear it beneath every broadcast, a ghost frequency threaded through the hum of the ship. I told myself it was stress, the consequence of too many sleepless vigils in rooms lit only by the glow of data slates. Yet deep down I knew better. The net was tightening. Whether it belonged to the Inquisition or the Hydra no longer mattered. I was caught inside it, and it was beginning to study me in return. When an Inquisitor falls under suspicion, the process of removal is delicate. There are no trials, no executions, only redirection. Your orders change. Your retinue is reassigned. The archives of your past are sealed. You become a ghost within the very machine you once served. I watched it happen from the inside. My authority codes began to fail one by one. My access to the Ordo's deeper archives, revoked. My acolytes, summoned away to temporary reassignment. My ship, rerouted toward a system not marked on any star map I knew. The message was clear. I was no longer the observer. I was the observed. The world they sent me to was called Calith Prime, a planet of dust and silence, its atmosphere choked with industrial decay. It had once produced munitions for the Imperial Guard, but now its manufactoria stood abandoned, their machine spirits long since dormant. The only inhabitants were servitors maintaining empty assembly lines, repeating motions for weapons that would never again be wielded. It was the perfect exile, a place where thought could be buried beneath endless monotony. But on the second night, I found evidence that I was not alone. In the central data spire, I discovered a shrine, crude, hidden behind a wall of rusted plating. Upon it lay the symbol of the Hydra carved into a plate of ceramite. Beneath the sigil, a phrase had been etched in low Gothic. Even this is the Emperor's will. The words were wrong. Too deliberate. Too precise. Whoever had written them knew exactly what kind of heresy they were planting. I should have destroyed it. Instead, I stayed there for hours, tracing the letters with my fingers, wondering if the message was meant for me specifically. By the 5th day, I began to receive transmissions, faint, intermittent, always distorted by interference. They came through my personal vox, encoded in inquisitorial cipher, yet carrying signatures that no longer matched any living agent. Each began the same way. This is not betrayal. The rest of the message was a flood of data, names, coordinates, directives, many of which referred to operations that I knew for certain had never existed, or perhaps had been erased. I recorded them, studied them, cross-referenced them with the fragments of my fading authority access. Slowly, a map began to emerge, not of space but of influence. It stretched across sectors, touching every ordo, every branch of Imperial power. And at its center, the same repeating mark appeared again and again, a twin-headed serpent biting its own tail. I realized then that the Hydra's genius was not in hiding from the Inquisition, but in becoming it. Each purge, each investigation, each sanctioned death had only fed its growth. Every Inquisitor who fell was replaced by another carrying traces of the same infection. Even purity became a vector. The net was no longer a weapon. It was a circulatory system, pumping secrecy and suspicion through the arteries of the Imperium until no one could tell what was real. One evening, as the twin sons of Calith sat behind the manufactoria spires, I received a final transmission. It was audio only. The voice on the line was calm, almost weary. I recognized it before it spoke my name. "Do you understand now?" it asked. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The voice continued. "We are not your enemy. We never were. We serve the same truth. We see it from different shadows." I wanted to protest, to demand names, proof, meaning, but the words caught in my throat, because part of me knew it was right. The Inquisition and the Hydra were two halves of the same blade, cutting the galaxy apart in order to keep it alive. Control and chaos, order and subversion, neither could exist without the other. The voice spoke one last time, soft as prayer. "You think you hunt us, but you are already one of us." Then the line went dead. When I left Calith Prime, I left nothing behind. Not the shrine, not the recordings, not even my name. The Ordo would erase it anyway. The Inquisition believes it can contain its own darkness, that it can purge infection without bleeding out. But the Hydra taught me something different. Infection is not the opposite of purity. It is the proof that purity exists at all. Every secret I have ever kept, every lie I have ever told in the Emperor's name, brings me closer to understanding them. The Hydra survives because we cannot imagine ourselves without it, and perhaps that was the point all along. They say the Hydra speaks with many voices, but the truth is it only ever needs one. Yours. That is the secret most Inquisitors never live long enough to understand. You do not hear the Hydra as a whisper in the dark, or a heretic's sermon in the ruins of some forgotten manufactorum. You hear it when you begin to question the silence between orders, when your faith begins to echo back at you, when the voice you trusted most begins to sound like your own. The tongue of the Hydra does not persuade. It reminds. It was on Calith Prime that I first began to dream of him, or of it if such things can have gender or flesh. The figure was never the same, but the presence was constant. Sometimes I saw a warrior, his armor the dull cobalt of long-dead campaigns, the Hydra coiling across his pauldron like a living brand. Other nights he was a scholar, cloaked in the gray robes of the administratum, his eyes bright with the cold light of reason. And sometimes he wore my face. Always, the words were the same. "You already serve." When I awoke, I would find fragments of text on my data slate that I had no memory of writing. Reports drafted in my hand, stamped with inquisitorial sigils that no longer existed. Each began as an investigation of cults, of schisms, of missing astropaths, and each ended with the same phrase embedded in the final paragraph: Hydra Dominatus. The handwriting was mine. The phrasing was perfect. Even the encryption matched my personal cipher. If I did not know I had written them, then who had? That question became the quiet rhythm of my existence. I would walk the halls of the ship and feel eyes upon me, though none of the servitors ever turned their heads. I would hear the machinery shift its cadence as if it were listening to my thoughts. Once, in the reflection of a viewing port, I saw someone standing behind me, a man wearing my armor, my sigil, my face. Yet when I turned, the corridor was empty. The Hydra's tongue was not a voice. It was a contagion of understanding. It whispered not from the outside in, but from within. It taught through recognition, through the slow erosion of certainty until every contradiction began to make sense. I began to see patterns everywhere. The double-headed eagle of the Imperium mirrored the Hydra itself, two heads bound to one body, forever watching in opposite directions. The Imperial truth on that ancient creed of reason was no different from the Alpha Legion's creed of subversion. Both demanded faith in what could not be proven. Both punished doubt. Both required obedience to unseen masters. I began to wonder if the Hydra's corruption was not rebellion but revelation. Perhaps they had seen the Emperor for what he truly was. Not a god, Not even a man, but an idea that could not be killed, only imitated. Perhaps their heresy was the purest form of faith. To believe that the Imperium's survival demanded deception, and to live that deception until it became indistinguishable from truth. That thought was my undoing. On the 3rd month of my exile, a courier ship intercepted my vessel. It bore the sigil of the Ordo Xenos, its transmission codes valid but oddly outdated, the kind used during the Great Scouring. Against protocol, I allowed docking. A single envoy boarded, a woman masked and hooded, her robes unmarked. She carried no weapon, no retinue, no sigil, only a data slate. She said nothing as she handed it to me. When I asked her name, she replied in perfect unaccented High Gothic, "You already know." Then she was gone. The slate contained one file, a confession. It was marked Alpha Primus Transmission, Level Absolute. It was my voice, my handwriting, my seal. The report detailed operations I had never conducted, orders I had never given, and the execution of inquisitors I had never met. The last entry ended with a single statement written in green font. "I am the Hydra's tongue. I destroyed the slate. I swear I did." But when I returned to my quarters, the words were waiting on my desk, etched into the surface of the metal. Not burned, not carved, and grown. After that, I stopped sleeping. My mind became a weapon turned inward, dissecting every thought, every impulse for signs of infection. The Hydra does not convert you. It convinces you that you were never unconverted. And yet, for all my fear, I began to feel something else. A strange, terrible calm. The burden of choosing sides fell away. In the war between the Alpha Legion and the Inquisition, truth was irrelevant. Purpose was everything. Both served the same god, survival. One night while walking the empty decks, I found the envoy waiting again, though I cannot swear she was real. Her mask gleamed faintly in the dim lumen light. "Do you see it now?" she asked. I told her I did. She nodded once, as though I had completed some unspoken rite. "Then speak it," I hesitated. But the words came as if I had always known them. Hydra Dominatus. Her form flickered, dissolving into static, and for the first time, I understood what it meant to speak with many voices. When the words left my lips, something shifted, not in the air, not in the ship, but in me. The phrase was not a password. It was a key, one that opened inward rather than out. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, a pulse that was not my heartbeat. For a moment, the world seemed to breathe in time with my thoughts. The shadows moved when I blinked. The hum of the ship's reactor harmonized with the rhythm of my own pulse. I realized with terrible clarity that I was no longer observing the Hydra. It was observing through me. Days lost meaning. I spoke less. The servitors aboard my vessel began to address me by a title I did not remember giving, Primus. I ordered them to stop, but the command protocols no longer recognized my voice. When I looked at their data logs, I found that the authorization signature was mine. I was becoming the ghost I had been hunting. It was around then that the envoy returned, though this time she did not come alone. I found them waiting in the observation deck, 6 figures, each robed, each wearing a different mask, a skull, a serpent, a mirror, an aquila, a blank visage of gold, and the last, a face identical to my own. None spoke. The envoy stepped forward and placed a small object on the console between us. A Vox recorder, old and battered, marked with the seal of the Inquisition. When she pressed it, the device hissed to life. My voice, my true voice, filled the room. It recited words I had never spoken. A declaration of loyalty, dated decades before I was even born. By my oath and blood, I serve the Emperor's design. Through shadow, through doubt, through heresy, if need be, I will preserve his vision. The envoy watched me, her expression unreadable beneath the mask. "You see now," she said quietly. "There was never a war. Only continuity. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to tear the mask from her face, to demand what any of this meant. But I couldn't. Because in that instant, the truth landed like a blade between my ribs. The Alpha Legion was not the Inquisition's enemy. It was its reflection, the secret part of the Imperium that spoke the truths the rest could not bear. They were the architects of doubt, the purifiers of complacency. The Imperium had to believe in monsters, so it made them. Perhaps it had always been that way. Perhaps the Hydra had not been born in rebellion, but by design. The envoy turned to leave, but I found my voice again. "Why me?" I asked. She paused at the threshold. "Because you looked too long into the mirror," she said. "And mirrors remember." When she was gone, the others followed, dissolving like smoke. Only the recorder remained. Its light flickered once before dying. I stared at it for hours until the dawn cycle began to bleed through the viewport. Outside, the stars seemed arranged differently, a pattern I could almost recognize curling upon itself in endless recursion. The Hydra's tongue does not speak commands. It speaks continuity. Every Inquisitor who disappears without a trace, every archive that seals itself, every purge that erases both victim and accuser, all of it is the Legion's true language. The Inquisition sustains the Imperium through fear. The Hydra sustains it through doubt. Between them, the galaxy keeps breathing. When I finally sent my next transmission to Terra, I did not encrypt it. I did not hide my words behind ciphers or seals. I wrote plainly, "The Hydra is not our enemy. It is our immune system." I never received a reply, but a week later a data slate appeared in my chamber unsigned. It contained one phrase, written in the same green font that had haunted me since the beginning, "Hydra Dominatus," and beneath it, 3 words I had never seen before, "Report to Terra." I do not know if it was a summons or a death sentence. Perhaps they are the same thing. But as the ship turned toward the light of the Astronomican, I felt no fear. Only the strange serenity of acceptance, the kind that comes when you realize that every choice you have made, every thought you believed your own, was always part of something larger. The Hydra does not command. It remembers. It does not conquer. It corrects. And as I gazed into the endless void, I understood that my voice had already joined the chorus. No official record speaks of what happened on the dead world of Nemea 9. It exists only in fragments, corrupted Vox captures, half-burned pict logs, and the fading recollections of a handful of survivors whose testimonies never reached the Conclave archives. It was there that the Shadow War became real. Not the war of whispers and codes, but one of blood and conviction, fought in the silence between the Hydra and the Inquisition. The planet itself was a corpse. Once it had been a shrine world, its surface covered with cathedra and reliquaries built to honor saints long since forgotten. Now those temples stood hollow, their spires broken like ribs. The ecclesiarchy had abandoned it after the last pilgrim ship stopped coming. But the Alpha Legion had not. Somewhere in the bones of that planet they had built something, or discovered something, the Inquisition could not afford to ignore. When I arrived, the air tasted of ash and iron. The landing zones were silent except for the hum of cooling engines. The strike force that accompanied me, 20 veterans of the Ordo's militant arm, the Redemptors, moved with the precision of those who had seen too much to be surprised. Their leader, Interrogator Cassian Rowe, was a man whose faith had hardened into something like contempt. He had read my reports, the ones the Conclave had never officially sanctioned. I could see it in the way he watched me, as if I were both command and contagion. We advanced through the ruins toward the planet's equatorial sanctum, where a massive crater split the city in half. Around its rim were symbols carved deep into the stone, markings too precise to be human, too deliberate to be random. When I brushed my glove against one, my Vox crackled with distant whispers, voices overlapping in languages I almost understood. Cassian warned me to stop. He said the stone itself was infected, that it remembered. At the heart of the crater stood a single structure, a monolith of black alloy rising from the dust like the spine of a buried god. It was covered in sigils that pulsed faintly with blue light. I recognized the pattern instantly, a cipher of the Hydra encoded through geometry rather than words. Every line of it was a message, every angle a calculation. "This is where it began," Cassian said quietly. I asked what he meant. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw fear beneath the scar tissue. "Not their heresy," he said. "Ours." The descent into the monolith was like entering a throat. The walls pulsed with a faint luminescence, alive but dying. We passed chambers filled with decayed machinery, their functions unrecognizable even to the tech adepts who accompanied us. Some of the devices still hummed, powered by sources that defied Mechanicus classification. Others appeared to have grown from the metal itself, as though the structure were self-repairing, self-aware. And then we reached the core. There, suspended in a field of shimmering light, was a sphere, transparent, humming softly, filled with shifting images. At first I thought it a form of data storage, but the images within it were not static. They moved. They changed. I saw faces, battles, worlds. I saw inquisitors kneeling before figures that bore the Hydra sigil. I saw alphabets rewriting themselves into holy script. I saw my own reflection dissolve into 1,000 others. Cassian raised his weapon, muttering the litany of purity, but I stopped him. Something in that sphere was speaking, not in words, but in impressions. I felt the pulse of memory, the echo of 1,000 thoughts converging into one. It was not communication. It was recognition. The sphere was not a weapon or archive. It was a mirror, one that reflected belief itself. Through it I saw the Alpha Legion's truth. They had not hidden from the Imperium. They had become it. Every secret organization, every faction that moved unseen, every inquisitor who questioned the righteousness of his orders, all of them bore the Hydra's touch. Some knew, most did not. The Legion was not a single army anymore, but a principle, a philosophy woven into the Imperium's veins. Cassian's voice broke the silence. "It's a trap," he said. "They want us to see this." Perhaps he was right. Perhaps the Hydra's final victory was to make us question whether victory itself had meaning. We set the demolition charges anyway. The structure groaned around us, the hum of the sphere growing louder, sharper. As we ascended toward the surface, I heard the sound again, the same static whisper from Calith Prime, clearer now, urgent. "You already serve." Cassian stopped on the final steps, turning his gaze toward me. "Tell me this isn't your doing," he said. His weapon trembled, but I saw the doubt already blooming behind his eyes. "I don't know anymore," I answered, and it was the only honest thing I had ever said. The charges detonated. The monolith split open like a wound. For an instant I saw light pour upward. Not fire, not plasma, but knowledge, raw and infinite. It touched everything. It touched us, and then Nemi and Naim ceased to exist. When I woke, I thought I was dead. The air was filled with ash and silence. The ground beneath me still trembling from the detonation. My armor's sensors were blind. My Vox was dead. The sky had fractured into a mosaic of burning clouds. Around me, the ruins of the sanctum smoldered. A city of ghosts lit by the flicker of dying machine spirits. Cassian was gone. So were the Redemptors. Only the crater remained, wider now, yawning like the mouth of a world that had finally exhaled. For a long while, I simply listened. No wind, no servitor hymns, just the slow hiss of cooling stone, and then faintly a whisper. At first I thought it was the wind returning, but the cadence was too measured. It was a voice. It spoke my name. I followed the sound through the wreckage deeper into the crater. There, amidst the rubble of the shattered monolith, I found what remained of the sphere. Fractured, its light bleeding out in slow pulses. Each pulse sent ripples through the dust, forming patterns too deliberate to be random. I realized, with the kind of dread that feels almost like awe, that it was trying to rebuild itself. I reached out without thinking. The instant my hand brushed its surface, a rush of images flooded my mind. Faces, words, memories that were not mine. I saw inquisitors and traitors sitting at the same tables, drinking from the same cups. I saw Alfarius walking beside men who would one day condemn him. I saw an inquisitorial seal stamped over the Hydra's sigil, and the two symbols fit perfectly. There was no difference. There had never been one. The revelation did not feel like knowledge. It felt like surrender. I tore my hand away, gasping, but the connection remained. I could feel the sphere's rhythm inside me now, beating in time with my own pulse. The Hydra had always been about infiltration, but I had never realized it could be this complete. Not the infiltration of armies or institutions, but of consciousness itself. The Legion did not occupy space. It occupied thought. And in that moment I understood the nature of the war. It was not between the Alpha Legion and the Inquisition. It was within them, within me. The Hydra and the Inquisition were not opposites. They were different expressions of the same disease. Two minds of the same body, each believing the other to be infection. And in the quiet of that broken world, I realized the war had never been about victory. It had been about balance. I heard the voice again, stronger now, clearer, though it was not coming from the sphere anymore. It came from everywhere, from the Vox lines that should have been dead, from the static in my auspex, from the pulse of my own blood. "You see it now," it said. I whispered into the ruins, "Who are you?" The answer came in the voice of Cassian Rowe. though I knew he was long gone. We are what remains when faith forgets its name. I stumbled back, half in terror, half in recognition. The Hydra was not speaking to me as an enemy. It was speaking to me as one of its own. The knowledge settled over me like a second skin. Every Inquisitor who sought absolute truth eventually came here. Maybe not to this planet, but to this realization. Some accepted it. Others died denying it. The ground trembled again, a deep vibration that rose through the rubble until it shook the air. The sphere's fragments began to lift, orbiting one another, reassembling, and within the forming light I saw figures, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps. Silhouettes in armor and robes, faces hidden, all watching me. Their outlines flickered like data ghosts, half real, half imagined. Some bore the insignia of the Alpha Legion. Others carried inquisitorial seals. A few had both. The voice spoke once more, and this time it was not a whisper. It was a chorus, and the male and female, human and machine, one and many. There was never betrayal, it said. Only purpose, and in that final moment, as the light grew so bright I could no longer see, I understood the truth that neither the Inquisition nor the Alpha Legion would ever admit aloud. The Imperium's survival depends on its own corruption. The Hydra does not destroy. It preserves through subversion. The Inquisition does not purify. It sanctifies the lie. Between them humanity endures, and not in glory but in continuity. When the light faded, I was alone again. The crater was empty. The sphere was gone. The ash had settled. And I knew what I had to do. I took up Cassian's abandoned bolt pistol from the rubble and turned it toward the horizon, where the faint shimmer of the Astronomican pulsed like a dying heartbeat. I whispered into the stillness, "Hydra Dominatus," and began the long walk back to the landing zone. Behind me, the wind rose again, carrying with it the faintest echo of 1,000 voices. Not in mockery, not in triumph, but in unity. The war without witnesses had ended, or perhaps it had only just begun. The void between stars is not silence. It hums, low and constant like breath through a dying lung. I heard that hum as my ship broke orbit from Nemea 9, its engines pushing through dust and debris that had once been faith, stone, and memory. The world burned below, but I could not feel sorrow. The Hydra had taught me too well. Destruction was never the end. It was simply another pattern forming. The vessel's machine spirit resisted the coordinates I entered, stuttering across its cogitator banks as if unwilling to obey. I overrode its protestations and set a course for Terra. Not because I sought redemption, not even because I believed I would reach it, but because the journey itself was the confession. Somewhere deep within the ship, the warp drives groaned awake, and the stars elongated into streaks of impossible light. Sleep would not come. The warp murmured against the hull, its voice closer now, more intimate. I could almost feel it studying me. The whisper I had heard on Calith Prime. The voice that had guided me into ruin now spoke softly through the Vox. It did not command. It asked questions. The kind no Inquisitor dares to entertain aloud. What do you think you serve? I said nothing. What is loyalty if both truth and lie lead to the same grave? I wanted to cut the Vox, to silence it, but my hand would not move. The voice was not separate from me anymore. It was the echo of my own reason, stripped of pretense. The Hydra had never sought to control minds. It sought to synchronize them, to make them see the same paradox, to live it until doubt became faith. Somewhere between dreams and memory I saw Alfarius. He stood on a shore of black sand, the sea before him thick and glimmering with oil. He did not wear his helm. His face was calm, unscarred, eerily human. I asked him if he was alive. He smiled. Alive is a word, he said. We are continuity. Behind him another figure approached, identical in every detail, even the voice. They turned toward each other and spoke in unison. The Legion endures because it forgets who leads it. When I awoke, the ship's proximity alarms were blaring. The warp had calmed, the Geller field holding firm, but we were not alone. A single vessel drifted ahead of us, unmarked, its hull blackened, its silhouette familiar. I magnified the image. The name etched across its prow froze my blood. Prevalidus. Caldus Ven's fortress ship, the one that had vanished into the warp years ago. I hailed it through every known frequency. No response. Only static. But within that static I heard something faint, a repetition, rhythmic and deliberate. I translated the sound through the ship's machine spirit. The The result chilled me more than any demon's roar could. It was my own voice, recorded and distorted. Hydra Dominatus. I boarded the Prevalidus alone. The air was stale, the corridors untouched by light. My footsteps echoed in the hollow decks. Everywhere I turned, I saw signs of abandonment. Empty armor racks, shattered icons, parchment litanies half burned to ash. But deeper inside, I found evidence that someone, or something, had been here recently. The walls bore handprints in oil and blood, each arranged in the same pattern as the Hydra's sigil. At the heart of the ship, in what had once been the Inquisitor's sanctum, I found the Vox recorder. The same model the envoy had given me. Its light pulsed faintly as if waiting. I pressed play. The voice that spoke was Ven's, but different, slower, heavier, as if echoing from a great distance. To whoever finds this, the war is not what you think. There is no victory. No heresy, only reflection. We made them, and in making them, they remade us. I looked too long into the Hydra and saw my own face. The recording ended with a single phrase, one that I had heard before but never fully understood. The Alpha Legion and the Inquisition are one body wearing different masks. The machine clicked off. For a moment the silence returned. Then behind me a second Vox began to play, not from the device but from the walls themselves. My own voice filled the chamber. It repeated the same confession word for word. I dropped to my knees. The room was alive now, its surfaces shifting with faint light, forming patterns that I recognized too well. Geometric recursion, self-replicating sigils. The Hydra, infinite, reflecting itself. I understood then what Nemia 9 had shown me. The Legion was not flesh and armor. It was thought. The Inquisition had become the perfect host. Billions of minds trained to question, to suspect, to survive. Each interrogation, each purge, each secret archive, all acts of replication, all parts of the same organism, and I was its tongue. I do not remember leaving the Prevalidus. I only remember the stars beyond its viewport, flickering in the rhythm of a pulse I could no longer call my own. When I returned to my ship, I found a message waiting on my data slate. No encryption. No sender. It read, "The mirror awaits." And with that, the course to Terra changed itself. The journey to Terra should have taken weeks. It took a heartbeat. The warp folded around the ship like a closing eye, and when it opened again, the throne world hung before me, vast, lifeless, yet radiant with the faint glow of the Astronomican's fading breath. From orbit, it looked like the corpse of a sun, brilliant still but hollowed out. No ships answered my hails. No defense grids activated. The orbitals were silent, their machine spirits long since surrendered to dormancy. As I descended through the smog, I saw what the Inquisition had become. Manufactura rusted into cathedra. Cathedra decayed into tombs. Every structure bore inscriptions in High Gothic that blended prayer with binary code, the language of devotion and data entwined. I wondered if even Terra still understood the difference between faith and programming. The landing site was the same plaza where inquisitors of old had once presented their proofs of purity before the conclave. It was empty now. The statues of saints were cracked, their faces worn smooth by time. Only one monument remained unbroken, a stone relief depicting the emperor flanked by two figures. One bore the Aquila, the other the Hydra, both knelt, their hands clasped in the same gesture of fealty. I knew then that the message was not metaphor. It had always been prophecy. The gates of the old inquisitorial fortress opened before me without command. Inside I found no guards, no acolytes, only echoes. The corridors smelled of dust and sanctified oil, and the light filtering through the fractured ceiling painted the walls in gold and gray. I walked deeper, guided by instinct or perhaps by design, until I reached the Chamber of Echoes, the place where confessions were once recorded, where every voice of guilt or revelation was preserved. The machinery still functioned, humming softly, awaiting input. As I approached the console, its hollow surface flickered to life. Lines of script scrolled upward. Interrogations, death warrants, sealed edicts. All bore the same identifier, Inquisitor Primus Alpha 1. I did not recognize the designation. Then the text paused. My name appeared. The recording began before I could react. My own voice filled the chamber. Subject self. Confession follows. It was not memory. It was inevitability. The voice spoke every thought I had ever feared, every doubt I had tried to bury beneath the armor of service. It recited my descent from faith to understanding, from understanding to complicity. It ended with words I had never said aloud but had carried in my heart since the day I first heard the Hydra's whisper. The Imperium must lie to itself to live. The playback ended. For a long time I stood there in the silence, watching the reflection of my face on the console's surface, though it was not truly mine anymore. The skin beneath my eyes shimmered faintly, the veins forming fractal patterns curling like the Hydra's coils. I was becoming the thing I had hunted, the thing I had feared, the thing the Inquisition had tried to erase from itself. Behind me, I heard movement. Footsteps in slow, deliberate echoing down the hall. I turned. A figure approached, clad in armor the color of dusk, the Hydra sigil etched in silver across the chest. His face was bare, serene, familiar. "Alfarius," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "Perhaps." We faced each other across the chamber. No weapons raised, no threat spoken. Only recognition. "Was this ever your plan?" I asked. "There were many plans," he said. "Some succeed by failing. Some fail by succeeding. Does it matter which this was?" I wanted to rage at him, to demand answers, but his calm dissolved my fury. "Why me?" I managed. "Because the Inquisition is the Hydra's final head," he said. "And every head must one day look into the mirror." He gestured toward the console. The hollow surface shifted, showing not data but images, reflections of myself multiplied into infinity. In each one I wore different armor, spoke different words, knelt before different masters. One held the Aquila, another the Hydra. All of them were me. All of them were true. The figure's voice softened. "You sought to end the war, but the war is the Imperium. It is what keeps it alive. We are not enemies, Inquisitor. We are the Emperor's final truth." And then he was gone. No light, no sound, no motion, only absence. I stood alone before the mirror. My reflection shifted one last time, and I saw what I had become. Not Alpha Legion, not Inquisition, but something between. A bridge, a contagion, a continuity. I touched the console, and my reflection touched back. The chamber filled with light, the same impossible radiance that had consumed Nemea 9. The difference was that this time, I did not resist. In that light I felt every thought of every Inquisitor who had ever lived. Every betrayal, every act of faith, every heresy. They were one voice, one mind, one Hydra. And somewhere within it, faint but enduring, I heard the echo of the Emperor's will, not as command but as endurance. He had known all along. He had allowed the infection because it kept his dream alive. When the light faded, I was standing outside again, the fortress silent behind me. The Astronomican pulsed overhead, stronger now as if newly fed. The wind carried the scent of ozone and dust. I understood then what Alfarius, or whatever that apparition was, had meant. The war would never end because it must not. The Hydra and the Inquisition would forever chase one another through history, each ensuring the other's survival. I looked to the horizon, where the golden towers of the Imperial Palace caught the dying light, and whispered the only truth that mattered. We are all Hydra. The wind answered in 1,000 voices, and for the first time since the beginning, I felt peace.